Dear friends, in this long, frigid season, when the earth hardens and the winds cut through the skin like the sharpest knives, we wander not just through the cold but through the depths of our own being, seeking the warmth we once knew or perhaps the warmth we've only heard of. The winter is a path both literal and figurative. Our footsteps may leave prints in the snow, but the soul's steps often vanish into the cold winds that bite without mercy. We walk through this world, through this life, seeking meaning amidst despondency and sloth, searching for light in the hours of the deepest darkness. It is easy, so very easy, to lose heart in the winter. The world seems to shrink, the trees, barren of leaves, resemble old bones against the gray sky. The sun hangs low and weak, as if it, too, is struggling to maintain its place in the heavens. And within us, too, there is a coldness that seems to match the season, a freezing of the spirit, a stifling of the will. There are moments when we feel we are nothing but shadows wandering in the wilderness of our own despondency, numbed to the point of losing all will to move forward. We become slothful, not out of choice, but because the weight of winter's harshness makes each step feel insurmountable. But even in the dead of winter, there is a movement, a flicker of something deeper. In the quiet solitude, in the long nights when even the wind seems to fall into silence, there is a call. Perhaps it is faint, perhaps it is only heard by those who are willing to listen through the despair and isolation, but it is there. It is a call to press on, to continue the journey, even when the way ahead is hidden beneath the snow and the frost. For in these winter months, there is something we must realize, that the cold, though it numbs, does not steal the potential of what lies beneath. Just as the earth appears dead in winter, the roots beneath the surface continue their silent work, and so too, the heart, in its winter of despondency, continues its labor, often unseen, often unrecognized, but nonetheless vital. Winter teaches us patience. It teaches us that even in the most barren seasons, something is growing, something is stirring beneath the surface. We may not feel it, but the soil is alive with preparation. Just as the vine appears to sleep under the weight of snow, so too does the soul sometimes rest, though not in idle sloth, but in a deep, hidden process, a process that, though we cannot always see it, is forming us for something more, for something greater than what we can now understand. I know many of you, my dear ones, are walking this winter's path alone. The cold winds may have scattered your hopes, and the bitter frost may have covered over the warmth of human connection. You may have lost those you loved, or feel separated by miles and months from those who would comfort you. I feel this with you, the ache of distance, the pain of separation. These are not small things, but still, I implore you, do not allow the coldness to draw you into deeper isolation, for in the silence, in the solitude, Christ whispers to us. In the void, He is present, waiting for us to recognize Him not in the warmth of the feast, but in the starkness of the frost. Yes, the days may be long, and yes, the darkness may stretch across the sky like a shadow that refuses to lift, but remember, this is not the end of the journey, it is merely a season. The spring will come, and with it, the light will return. But until then, walk in the hope that even the winter, with its harshness, holds within it a lesson. Even in the stillness, there is movement. Even in the cold, there is the possibility of warmth, if only we remain open, if only we do not turn inward and shrink from the discomfort of the present moment. You may feel distant from those who walk beside you, or even from God, as if the distance is too great and the path too long. But I tell you this, in Christ, though we are miles apart, though we walk through different winters, we are one. We are one in our struggle, one in our longing, one in our desire to find meaning, to find warmth. And just as He came to walk beside us in the cold, in the wilderness, in the darkest hour, so too does He walk with us now, even in this very moment, even as we trudge through the snow of our own despondency. So I ask you, my dear ones, do not give in to the sloth of the spirit. Do not let the cold steal your will. Instead, let it forge you, let it purify you. The winter is long, yes, but it is not eternal. The sun will rise again. the days will lengthen, and the warmth will return. But until then, be faithful in your journey, even when it seems that the path is lost to the fog, even when the weight of the world bears down upon your shoulders like the thick snow. Know that you are not alone. Know that you are not forgotten. There is a warmth that comes in the deepest silence, a light that shines in the darkest hours. Keep walking, even if your steps are slow, even if you cannot yet see the end, for the journey, in its winter, is not without meaning. The harshness of the cold, the despondency of the spirit, it is not in vain. Through this journey, we are made more than we were before, and when the spring comes, we will emerge, having been shaped by the frost, renewed by the cold, and ready to bloom. Be patient, my dear ones, keep walking, keep waiting, even through the winter, and know that in Christ, we are one, and this journey, though long and lonely, is leading us to something greater than we can yet understand. But I must tell you, my friend, that I know it is hard to walk when the weight of despair presses upon your shoulders like an unrelenting storm. There are days when the cold feels unbearable, when the wind howls through your bones and your heart feels the chill more deeply than the frost. You may ask yourself, what is the point of this struggle? Why endure such pain, such suffering, such isolation? What is the meaning of it all? Ah, yes, I hear you. I hear the quiet cry of your heart, the whisper of doubt, the longing for relief from the torment. The struggle is real, the despondency is real, and the weariness, oh, the weariness, is a heavy, suffocating blanket that wraps itself around you. But in this struggle, I tell you, there is purpose. In this very struggle, we are being shaped into something that could never be formed in comfort. In the depths of winter, our souls are being forged. For you see, the wilderness of the spirit, just like the barren, frozen earth, holds within it the potential for growth. But this growth is not immediate, nor is it easily seen. Growth in the winter is hidden, buried beneath layers of snow and ice. But just as the tree roots grow deeper into the frozen ground, so too does our soul grow deeper into Christ in these hard seasons. The soil may appear lifeless, but there is life beneath it, life that will emerge when the time is right. This is the mystery of suffering. It purifies us, it refines us, it tests us. Without this purification, we would never know the depth of God's love, for it is through the struggle, through the heat of the furnace, that the dross is burned away, and the pure gold of our faith is revealed. It is easy to love when the sun is shining, when the flowers bloom and the birds sing. But it is in the darkness of winter, in the silence of the barren places, that the true strength of our love is tested. Will we still believe? Will we still hope? Will we still trust when everything around us seems to be dying? Yes, the cold is painful. Yes, the journey is long. But I tell you, my dear ones, it matters more than you can imagine. For in this very struggle, in this very silence, you are being drawn closer to Christ, closer to the love that will never fail. He who knows the depths of despair, who walked the road of suffering to the very cross, is walking beside you in your own suffering. He is not distant, he is not absent, he is with you in this very moment. Though you may not feel him, he is working in ways unseen, preparing you for a greater glory, a greater love, a greater joy than you have ever known. But how? You might ask, how can we endure? What do we do in this long, lonely journey through the winter of the soul? The answer, my dear ones, is simple, though not always easy. We keep going, we keep walking, even when the road is dark, even when the way seems unclear. We walk with the knowledge that the one who has walked before us is walking beside us now. When our hearts are heavy, when we are filled with sloth, when we feel the urge to give in, to pull the covers over our heads and retreat into the safety of self-pity, we must remember this: we are not alone. Even when the world seems cold and distant, Christ is there. He is the warmth in the cold, the light in the darkness. But how do we feel that warmth? How do we recognize His presence? We recognize it in small, quiet moments, moments that may seem insignificant to the world but are everything to the soul. The prayer offered in silence, the small act of kindness done in the solitude, the deep breath taken in the stillness. All these are ways we invite Christ into the winter of our hearts. There will be days when it feels as though he is far away, as though he is silent, as though he has forgotten you, but I urge you, do not be deceived by the absence of feeling, for in those very moments of silence, God is at work in ways we cannot see, working through the struggle to bring us closer to him. When you feel your soul sinking into the cold pit of despair, when the weight of sloth bears down on you, remember this too shall pass. The winter is long, yes, but it is not eternal. The darkness will lift, the days will grow longer, and the sun will once again warm the earth. So too, will the warmth of Christ return to your heart. But until then, do not despair, do not give up, even if you feel you have lost everything, even if you feel that the light has vanished from your life. Keep walking. But how do you walk, when every step feels like a burden too heavy to bear? You walk by remembering. You walk by remembering that the journey itself is the gift. The struggle is not something to be avoided, it is something to be embraced. For it is in this struggle that we are shaped, purified, made holy. You walk by remembering that, even in your loneliness, even in your despondency, you are united with the saints, the angels, and with all of us who, though separated by distance, walk the same road with you. You walk by remembering that, though the winter seems endless, Christ is present in the very cold you experience. His love is not confined to warm, comfortable places. It is present in the very heart of winter, in the coldest, darkest nights of the soul. He does not turn away from your pain, he enters it, suffers with you, and draws you closer to his heart in the midst of it. You walk by remembering that the struggle is not in vain. It is a means to something greater than we can understand. It is in the dying of the old that the new can emerge. Just as the earth must lie fallow in winter before the spring can come, so too must we sometimes be brought low before we can be lifted up. The struggle is the gateway to resurrection. The dark winter is the preparation for the light of the spring. So keep walking, my dear ones. Do not turn back, even when the road is icy and the journey seems long. Your suffering is not wasted, your struggle is not meaningless, and in the end, when the spring comes, when the warmth returns, you will see that all of it, the cold, the struggle, the waiting, has been for a greater purpose than you could have ever imagined. And so, we wait together, we wait in the silence, we wait in the cold, and we wait in the hope that Christ, who has walked this road before us, will walk with us still. Keep walking, keep waiting, even through the winter, for in the waiting, we are made new. How often we despise waiting. We are a people of haste, of urgency, of desires to rush to the end, to skip the process, to find a quick remedy for the heart's pain. But here, in this deep winter of the soul, we are given an invitation, a sacred invitation to wait, to rest, to trust that something is being formed within us that cannot be rushed. This waiting is not passive, it is not a mere sitting by until the storm passes. No, this waiting is a kind of labor. It is a labor of the spirit, of the soul, of the heart, a labor in which we allow God to work in us, even when we cannot feel the work being done. In the silent and seemingly barren winter, we find that we are actually being made fertile, even as the surface of the earth lies dormant. The frost may cover the ground, but beneath it, the roots grow deeper, drawing from the hidden sources of life that we cannot see. Likewise, our hearts, though they may seem encased in a shell of ice, hardened by disappointment, suffering, or the weight of loss, are being prepared for a spring we cannot yet perceive. We often forget that waiting is not just about doing nothing. No, in the kingdom of God, waiting is a form of becoming. The barren winter is not a pause in our journey, it is part of the journey. It is the very space in which we are being shaped. The season of winter brings with it a kind of spiritual renewal that cannot occur in the warmth of abundance or the comfort of ease. The cold, the hardship, the isolation, all these are the tools by which the Lord prepares us for the next season. Why do I say that? Because, my dear ones, it is in the waiting, when the winds howl and the world seems so far away, that we learn a deeper kind of patience, not a passive, resigned patience, but a hopeful patience, a patience that trusts that though we cannot see the fullness of the harvest, we trust that it is coming, a patience that understands that even now, in the depths of winter, God is at work, and so, we wait, not in despair, not in self-pity, but in holy anticipation. We wait for the moment when we will see the first sign of new life, the first shoot breaking through the cold earth. We wait for the moment when the light will return and warm us once more. We wait in the knowledge that Christ is present in the waiting, that His love is not confined to the moments when we are warm and comfortable, but that it fills the empty spaces, the cold spaces, the places where we feel lost and distant. Christ is in the waiting, He is in the cold, and He is the warmth that will come. But I ask you, how do we wait well? How do we endure this long winter of the heart without succumbing to bitterness, to sloth, to despair? How do we find the strength to continue walking, step by slow, painful step, through the harsh winds of our inner wilderness? The answer, my beloved, lies not in doing but in being. It lies in our willingness to be present to the moment, to embrace the silence, to open our hearts to the stillness. For in that stillness, God speaks. In that silence, He renews. It is only when we allow ourselves to be still, to stop fighting the cold, to stop rushing toward the end, that we become aware of the work He is doing in us. The world tells us to keep moving, to keep striving, to never stop, to always be filling the void with activity. But the spiritual journey, the real journey, is the opposite. It is in stopping, it is in stillness, it is in letting go of the need to control, to fix, to do something. It is in allowing ourselves to feel the cold, to feel the loneliness, to feel the ache, without turning away. When we sit in that coldness, when we do not shrink from the silence, that is when God can do His most powerful work. I know it is not easy. I know the weight of waiting feels at times unbearable, but I remind you, in the very depths of the struggle, that Christ Himself waited. He waited in the garden, He waited on the cross, He waited for 3 days in the tomb, and from that waiting came the resurrection. So, too, your waiting, though it seems long and painful, will lead you to resurrection. It will lead you to the spring that comes after the frost, to the warmth that follows the cold. You may wonder, in this moment, how long this winter will last. Will it ever end? Will the warmth of Christ ever return? My dear ones, I cannot tell you how long your winter will last. I cannot predict when the thaw will come, or when the sun will shine upon your heart once more. But I can tell you this, the winter will not last forever. There is a spring, a resurrection, a new life waiting for you. You do not walk alone through this cold. You do not endure this waiting without purpose. In the fullness of time, the warmth will return, and with it, you will be made new. And when that moment comes, you will look back on this winter with different eyes. You will see it not as a season of loss, but as a season of preparation. You will recognize that it was in the cold, in the silence, in the struggle, that you were formed into someone new. The beauty of the spring will be all the more radiant because you have walked through the darkness of winter. So, my dear ones, keep walking, keep waiting, do not rush to the end, do not despair in the cold. For in the waiting, you are being made new. Christ, who has walked through the darkness before you, is walking with you now. He is the light that will guide you through the winter, the warmth that will revive your soul when the time is right, and in the end, when you emerge from the cold, you will be more fully alive than you ever knew was possible. Be patient, then, trust the process, embrace the waiting, for the end of the winter will bring with it a glory that you cannot yet imagine. And until then, remember, you are not alone, you are loved, you are being prepared for a future that is more beautiful than your present heart can hold. Be patient, then, trust the process, embrace the waiting, for the end of the winter will bring with it a glory that you cannot yet imagine. And until then, remember, you are not alone, you are loved, you are being prepared for a future that is more beautiful than your present heart can hold. My dear ones, I have walked with you through this cold season, through the barren wilderness of winter, and I ask you now to take heart. The journey we have shared, though long and arduous, has not been for nothing. All that you have endured, every pang of loneliness, every bitter gust of despair, every moment of sloth that tried to steal your will, has been a part of the preparation. A preparation for what? For what lies beyond the cold, for what lies beyond the struggle, for what lies beyond the silence. When you began this journey, you may have thought it was about survival. You may have thought that the goal was merely to endure, to make it through the winter without losing yourself, without giving up. But now, looking back, you see that it was not just about survival, it was about transformation. The winter, though it froze your limbs, softened your heart, it stripped away all that was unnecessary, all that was distracting, all that was false, and in its place, it gave you a deeper awareness, a deeper knowledge of who you truly are in Christ. It is so easy to think that when the winter comes, when the cold bites hard and the world feels far away, that we are abandoned, but in truth, it is in the winter that we come closest to understanding the nature of God. For, my beloved, Christ himself embraced the cold, he entered the wilderness, he walked the lonely road, and he did so not for himself, but for us, so that when we, too, walk through our winters, we might know that he has been there first. He has walked this road ahead of us, and now, in his mercy, he walks with us still. In the cold and barren seasons, we come to know the depth of his love. It is not a love that is confined to the moments of ease, of warmth, of abundance. No, it is a love that reaches down into the frost, into the silence, into the depths of the soul where we feel most alone. It is a love that does not flee when things grow hard. It is a love that stays, that presses in, that renews us in the very place of our deepest need. And so, I say to you now, do not be afraid of the winter, do not be afraid of the cold that touches your heart, the darkness that seems to stretch on forever, for in it, you are being shaped into something more. In it, you are being prepared for the fullness of your life in Christ, for the glory that is beyond your imagination. As the days grow longer, as the frost begins to lift, you will begin to see it, this new life that has been forming in you all along. The sun will return, and with it, the warmth. But do not forget the gift of the winter. Do not forget what you have learned in the silence, what you have discovered in the struggle, what you have become in the waiting. For, my dear ones, when the spring comes, you will not be the same. You will not emerge from the winter unchanged. You will rise like the flowers that, though hidden beneath the snow, were always waiting for the right moment to bloom. And in that moment, when the warmth returns and the light touches your soul, you will see, this was the purpose of the waiting, this was the purpose of the cold, this was the purpose of every lonely step you took. In the light of the spring, you will understand what I have said to you in the dark, that in the waiting, you were made new, that in the silence, you were drawn closer to Christ, that in the cold, you were being prepared for the warmth, and that in the struggle, you were being formed into someone who could carry the fullness of God's love, a love that is now ready to be shared with a world that is so desperately in need of it. You may still feel, at times, the echoes of winter in your soul, the shadow of past struggles, the remnants of old wounds, but I urge you, dear ones, to look not at the past but at the future that is now unfolding before you. The journey that you began in the cold, the struggle that you endured in the silence, is now leading you into a spring that is filled with beauty, with joy, and with a glory that you cannot yet fully comprehend. But trust me when I say this, it is a glory worth the waiting, a glory worth the struggle, a glory worth the cold. Now, as you take your first steps into this new season, know this, you are not the same person who began the journey. You are more alive, more aware, more in love with Christ, more fully yourself than ever before. And though the world may seem uncertain, though the future may still hold its mysteries, you can walk forward with the confidence that the winter was not in vain, the waiting was not in vain, the pain, the longing, the loneliness, none of it was wasted. All of it has been leading you here, to this moment, where you stand on the cusp of something new, something more glorious than you have yet imagined. And when you look back, as you surely will, you will see that it was in the winter that you learned the deepest truths about yourself, about Christ, and about the world. It was in the winter that you were given the gift of waiting, waiting for the light, waiting for the warmth, waiting for the resurrection. And now, as you stand at the edge of that resurrection, you will know that the waiting has not been for nothing. It has been the very thing that has prepared you for the beauty that awaits you. So, dear ones, do not be afraid of the waiting, do not be afraid of the cold. Embrace it, walk through it, and know that on the other side, there is a glory waiting for you, a glory that, when it arrives, will make the winter seem but a distant memory, for in the end, you will see, the waiting was not the hardship, the waiting was the blessing, and in the spring, you will bloom. The winter of the soul is not a season to be feared or avoided, but one to be embraced with quiet trust. It is in this season of cold and barrenness that we are purified, refined, and made ready for the glory to come. The winter strips away the distractions, the false comforts, and the illusions that keep us from seeing God's true work in our lives. It is a time of spiritual nakedness, where we are laid bare before God, not to be abandoned, but to be reshaped. Like the earth beneath the frost, we may feel frozen and lifeless, yet we are not. The seed of God's grace is planted deep within us, and even in the silence, it is growing. In this time of waiting, there is no need for frantic effort or struggle. The wisdom of the elders teaches us that survival is not about pushing through or trying to hurry the process, but about being in the moment, being present to God, trusting His timing, and remaining patient in the stillness. The cold will pass, the darkness will eventually give way to light, but what will remain, what will have been transformed, is the person we become through the waiting. Winter is not the end, it is the preparation for something far more glorious. So, hold fast, dear ones, though you may feel lonely, though the cold may seem unyielding, know this, you are not alone. Christ walks with you in the chill, His love sustaining you even when you cannot feel it. The promise of spring is sure, and in that spring, you will see that the winter, though harsh and difficult, was the very thing that brought you closer to God. It was the forge in which your soul was purified. It was the wilderness that led you to the promised land. Winter is not the enemy. It is the messenger, the guide, the moment of quiet transformation. And when the warmth of spring finally arrives, you will look back and see that the waiting, the cold, the stillness, these were not burdens, but blessings. They were the quiet preparation for a harvest that you could not yet imagine. So, walk through the winter with hope, knowing that this season too shall pass, and you will emerge from it not just surviving, but thriving in the glory of the resurrection that comes with the dawn. And when the warmth of spring finally arrives, you will look back and see that the waiting, the cold, the stillness, these were not burdens, but blessings. They were the quiet preparation for a harvest that you could not yet imagine. Through every frostbitten moment, every ache in your heart, God was planting the seeds of something more beautiful, something more eternal. The winter was not a punishment, but a loving shaping, a necessary refining. So, walk through the winter with hope, knowing that this season too shall pass, and when it does, you will not only survive, you will thrive, you will be renewed, stronger, more whole, more at peace, because in the deepest part of the cold, Christ was there, making you whole again. When the dawn of spring breaks, you will emerge into the light, not as you were, but as the person you were always meant to be. Trust in the transformation, dear ones. Trust that God's love has been working within you all along, even in the silence. And when the warmth of the sun touches your face once more, you will know that every step, every struggle, was part of His perfect plan. The winter will fade into memory, and you will stand tall, rooted in the hope of the resurrection, flourishing in the glory that now, in the light of Christ, you can finally see. When the first rays of the sun warm the earth once more, you will see it was not the hardship of winter that broke you, it was the grace of God working in you through it. You will emerge from this season not as you were, but as someone stronger, someone more whole. The cold will not last forever, and the warmth that comes will be all the more beautiful because you have endured the winter in faith. So, dear ones, as you journey through this time, know that it is not without purpose. Each icy step, each lonely hour, is drawing you closer to the glory that awaits you on the other side. Winter is not to be feared, it is to be embraced, for in the stillness of the cold, God's love is working, and when the spring comes, you will stand taller, deeper, and more rooted in His grace than ever before.